Okay, so we'll go ahead and continue with our week one lecture and why we get people wrong. And we've kind of discussed this thus far, but to make it fairly simple, our brains do take shortcuts when we understand others or try to understand others. And so social psychology gives us the tools to become more accurate. And as we keep moving, we will talk about why our brains take shortcuts in general. And let me move this just a little bit. Okay. So again, hopefully by the end of this, you can kind of realize like we can't always trust our first explanation. So this will kind of set us up in future weeks for talking about attribution and schemas, heuristics, stereotypes, and social cognition, which are all things we touched on in intro, but we'll go over in more depth in the coming weeks. Okay, so um, at the end of the last lecture, I did ask for you to go ahead and try to notice something social psychological in the world for that matter. Um, and so just thinking about where you might have observed social psychology. And since you guys can't respond, I will just go ahead and mention some. Again, maybe you witnessed somebody helping somebody. Maybe you witnessed peer pressure. Like maybe you witnessed literally somebody hold the door for somebody. Maybe you witnessed somebody creating a TikTok video or possibly doing a TikTok challenge, whatever that is right now, the hot one. Maybe you witnessed a teacher teaching and showing leadership. Maybe you saw somebody laughing or crying because somebody told a joke. Maybe you saw somebody smile at somebody else. All of these things are aspects of social psychology. Every single day, we're seeing these things and we're taking them for granted as we move through the world, but every one of them have to do with the interaction amongst humans. And here's an example. Again, if you're looking for one, if you weren't quite sure, even though I just mentioned some, maybe you're at the grocery store and you watch somebody, because this happens, switch from one checkout line to another because everybody else started moving. Okay, maybe you've done this before. Maybe the lines are long and one seems to start moving faster, so you move over to that other lane. But you know what? By the time that you do that, the one that you left starts moving faster. We've all been there before. And again, nothing really changed. You just followed the crowd. Like everything was moving, so that's where you went. And the question is like, why would you do that? And again, you assume that others know something. And so you don't want to make the wrong choice. You copy what everybody else does. And again, so we're going to learn why we do things like that. Okay, other examples, we buy something because of the reviews. We wear certain clothes or brands because other people do. And so these are all really great real world observations that can be made. And again, here the thing is, do our explanations of what we're observing, are our explanations of what we're observing actually correct? So here's a young man. What is happening? Okay, he's just a guy sitting on a park bench on his phone. Okay, just that's the description of him. What kind of person is he? What do you think he's feeling? Right before this picture was taken, what do you think happened? What happens after? Okay, here's some ideas. Because again, we have limited information, but our brains are still going to make assumptions with the limited information that we have. Okay, maybe we're like, well, he's lonely, he's alone, look at him. Maybe he's waiting for somebody. Is he bored? Maybe he's bored, he's just doom scrolling. Okay, maybe he's just relaxing. He's sitting in the park just scrolling social media. Maybe he just got some good news. Maybe he got bad news. Maybe he's waiting for an Uber. Okay, so which one of those things could be correct? Again, we don't know. But it's easy to feel confident in our initial assumptions. Because our brains, even though we don't have all the information, our brains will try to fill in the missing information. Because our brains don't like uncertainty. And because our brains do not like uncertainty, our brains will fill in the gaps, even though we don't have enough evidence to create an entire picture. And again, can we trust our intuition? Yes, very often we can trust our intuition, but not all of the time. And that intuition does result in confidence, but confidence doesn't always equal accuracy because we need evidence. And again, so there's times when our intuition has been right. There's times when it's been wrong. It's just not perfect, is the thing. So I don't want anybody to think that intuition is bad. It's a starting point. It gives us a baseline to build the story with additional evidence. So instead of asking, yeah, okay, what do I think? Social psychologists ask, what does the evidence show? All right, this is the difference between opinions and evidence. Research is going to ask questions. Evidence is going to challenge any assumptions that we might make. Good questions do matter. And so, okay, here's a very common one and one that social psychologists are interested in, and we'll talk about as the semester goes on, is do violent video games make people more aggressive? And again, right off the bat, okay, your brain probably said yes or no. I put money on it, your brain said yes or no. We all have an opinion. And here's the thing is rather than relying on opinions or headlines, researchers are going to collect evidence. They're going to compare findings across studies. We're going to do meta-analyses and look at what the overall body of research suggests. And it is much more complex than saying yes or no, honestly. It is much more complex. There's a lot of moderators and mediators in regard to that question. And so that's why research helps us answer difficult questions more accurately than opinions alone, because the answers are very commonly much more complex and much more in the gray than our intuition allows for. So how do we find answers? There's a couple of different primary research methods that social psychologists use. Um, so we use observation surveys and experiments. And depending upon what question we're asking research-wise, that's going to dictate what methodology we choose. There's no best method necessarily. Each one is going to have strengths and weaknesses. But let's say, suppose we want to know whether social media affects self-esteem. All right. How could we study that? Okay, we could observe this. Okay, we could watch social media use. We could ask people about their self-esteem, or maybe we have one group take a break from social media and then compare changes that happen over time. Okay, so technically we could use any of those methodologies. All right, but let's talk about observations first. An observation is a methodology in which we watch behavior as it naturally occurs. We do not intervene. It's good for observing real world behavior to see what patterns kind of emerge. It is also important here, especially when we're talking about observation and surveys. These are correlative methodologies, and so we cannot come to any causal conclusions. We can't say that one variable directly causes something else to happen. We can say that one variable is related to another variable, but that is all. It's merely correlative in nature. Um, so let's see here. Yes, the limitation, we cannot determine cause and effect. So yeah, we're looking at observing, recording, and identifying general patterns. Um, and so it helps us see what people do, okay? But if we want to understand what they're thinking or feeling, we need to go a little bit further because observation is going to be limited in that sense. And so then we could possibly do a survey. And again, a survey in this case is possibly going to be correlative in nature. Um, and so this asks directly what our thoughts and beliefs, feelings, and attitudes might be towards something. Again, the strength is going to be we can collect information from a lot of people very, very quickly. It's rather cheap as well. Now, part of the problem is that people don't always tell the truth. Part of the other problem is memory is fallible, as we'll talk about. So, just as an example, because I did use survey research in my dissertation, and for those of you that don't know me, my dissertation was it was basically on conspiracy theory beliefs, and one of the key variables in my dissertation, okay, belief in conspiracy theories, and so I couldn't observe that by just watching people. I had to ask them about their beliefs in conspiracy theories by using carefully designed survey measures. And so I would never have been able to use an observational study by just watching somebody walk across campus to determine what their conspiracy theory beliefs were. So, in regard to that, because of the variables I was studying and what I wanted to study, I had to ask people about them. So, in regard to these survey instruments and the ones that I used as well, they um, you have to prove that they are reliable, and this happens over years and decades. It's just not asking questions. Surveys through a variety of quantitative means have to be proven to be reliable and valid in nature, in that they are measuring what they purport to measure, and they are measuring the same thing over time. Okay, so observation, we're describing behavior. Awesome. Surveys, we're understanding thoughts and beliefs. But let's say we want to answer the question that, okay, everybody wants to know what causes the behavior. All right, so now we want to get into cause and effect. And so observation is not enough, surveys aren't enough. We have to do an experiment. So let's say, like, if students who exercise more get higher grades, is it exercise that's causing the better grades? Okay. Yep, I know that's rhetorical right now, but okay. Could there be other explanations? The answer is yes. Maybe they're just disciplined. Maybe they're getting more sleep. Maybe they're more motivated. Maybe they just have better health in nature in general. But the thing is so in order to determine, okay, does exercise cause better grades? We have to be able to show cause and effect. And as a result of that, we have to use an experiment. That is the only way in order to determine cause and effect within science. So, this is something I would do in the classroom. So, I'm just going to run it today. Hopefully, this works via this online lecture video. All right. So, the research question, okay, does the presence of people influence performance? And again, what do you predict? A lot of you probably say yes. Okay. So, okay, in general, what we would do here is I would divide the class. Okay. We would just have a task of alphabetizing 10 words. Everybody's going to alphabetize 10 words. Half of the class is going to work quietly by themselves. Okay. And then the other half of the class, they will work while the rest of the class watches them. So half the class gets to do it by themselves, nobody watching them. The other half does it while everybody watches them. Okay. Then we're going to look at how well they did. We're going to look at how long it took them, how accurate they were, and how they felt. We're going to ask, did being watched help? Did it make them nervous? And we'll probably get some answers like, no, I worked faster, I got nervous, they looked at me, or I made more mistakes. That is honestly, that is a very basic um, experiment in nature. So, okay, here we go. And just looking at what we just went over here, okay? Group of students randomly assigned to group A or group B. Half worked alone, half worked while being observed. Then we determine their performance levels. Now, the independent variable, what the researcher changed. And that would have been being observed. Half were observed, half were not. Okay, the dependent variable, what the researcher measured. And that is going to be the performance on the alphabetization. And then the random assignment, again, placed into groups. And so with that random assignment, again, we are looking to make sure that there are not, um, there's no bias in the placement of individuals in groups, and it takes care of any demographic similarities as well. And so, in regard to experiments, just a little history. The first social psychology experiment was done by Triplett in 1898. And he was interested in do people perform differently when other people are present? And he did this using by experimenting on cyclists. Uh, and so what happened is that um, Triplett noticed cyclists often rode faster when they raced against others than when they rode alone. So he tried to figure out, like, okay, how do I test this? So he designed an experiment using children winding fishing reels. This is the best picture I could find for this. And a lot of participants completed the task faster when another child was present. Okay, and this is basically the experiment that we just did as to whether you perform better when somebody is observing you or when somebody is not. And so here's the thing again is we're looking at okay, there was something we observed in society that was really interesting. It was that we were curious about it. And as a result of that, we asked a question. Okay, yeah, do people perform differently when other people are present? And then, okay, let's figure it out. Let's experiment on children winding fishing reels to determine this. And we're finding, yes, there is a significant difference between whether or not somebody is watching somebody perform as to their performance levels. That is science at work. Okay, so these are some of the questions that shape social psychology, and we are going to go over all of them this semester. Why do people conform? That will be Ash. Why do people obey authority? Milgram. How powerful are situations? Zimbardo. How do groups create conflict? Sharif. And why do we favor us over them? And that would be Tajfel. And So we will go over all of them in this class. And so one thing, if you are interested in it for this week, again, we're not going to talk about it because you are watching an online video. Notice one time when your first impression of somebody changed after you learned more about the situation. Again, we went over several examples, but maybe try to think about one that we haven't talked about. Okay, I appreciate you watching this video, and I will see you in week 2.